Okay guys, I'm going to show you how I make my gold crackled fondant. I've got here just some white Renshaw fondant that I'm going to roll out nice and flat. Put down some cornstarch. And the trick is not to roll this quite as big as you need it to be, because we're going to roll it out even more to cover our cake. So you just start off with maybe a 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit thinner. And then I'm going to torch the surface of this fondant with my creme brulee torch. And I want this surface to be fairly browned. The reason I'm showing you on the white is so that you can see just like how much it's actually going to be torched. Don't worry, this doesn't change the flavor of the fondant. It doesn't make it taste burned. In fact, it actually makes it taste more delicious, kind of like a toasted marshmallow. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my torch. I'm going to start up at the top and just go in little circles. And you should torch it enough that you see that the surface of the fondant kind of melts a little bit. That's that creme brulee action. And you want to make it kind of a nice, even golden brown color. And the nice thing about doing this on a white piece of fondant is that you can easily see any places that you haven't torched properly. So like if you miss a spot, okay, let's say I was going like this, and I was torching, and I can see that this spot right here is still white. When you go to crackle that, it's not going to crack. So you just want to make sure that everything has got an even amount of browning. Just making little circles. You don't have to worry about the edges because you're probably going to just cut those off. Just going back over and re-hitting any spots that seem like they're kind of light. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now we want to paint the surface of this gold. I've just been letting it cool for maybe 2 minutes. And normally when you paint the surface with this gold paint, it can transfer onto your hands or your rolling pin when it dries. So what I like to do is actually paint the surface with some confectioner's glaze first. Confectioner's glaze is just like this edible kind of lacquer that they put on top of things like M&Ms and candy and things to make them shiny. And you could also use something like an edible spray, like a clear coat like PME or a cake gloss spray. That works as well. And I don't mix the glaze with the actual gold itself because the glaze tends to tone down the shininess for some reason. So I'm just going to cover this with the glaze first. And I buy my confectioner's glaze from Ruth Rickey. I'll put a link to her underneath the video in the description. And that should dry pretty quickly. And then you're going to come in with your gold dust and Everclear, or you can use rose water, or you can use lemon extract, and you're going to paint over the surface. So this is the non-toxic gold from Truly Mad Plastics, mixed with a little bit of Everclear. But if you wanted this to be totally edible, you could use the gold from True Color, or Rainbow Dust makes a nice gold. Edible Arts, Decorative Paints makes a nice edible gold. Okay. And then I'm going to let this dry for maybe like 10 minutes until the fondant feels cold. Okay, so now it's time to crackle the fondant. Just going to come in with like a bench scraper just to make sure it's unstuck from the surface of the table, because sometimes the heat can just cause it to stick. I'm just going to put down some fresh cornstarch. You can see it already wanting to crackle. And I like to crack with a hard plastic rolling pin. I feel like it makes better cracks. Crack both ways, horizontal and vertical. And the more you crack, like the more you roll it, the wider the space will be between the cracks. So just keep that in mind. I'm just gonna bring in my bigger rolling pin now. I think this looks just like alligator skin. I think it looks really pretty. Okay, and just roll that up onto your rolling pin. Just gonna unroll. Paying special attention to the front edge first. I mean, come on, that looks freaking gorgeous already. I'm just going to flatten just like you would when you're covering a regular fondant cake. You can also panel the cake if you want to, if you feel more comfortable paneling. The texture of the gold does make it a little bit tricky down right around the bottom, but not too bad. Just have to give it a little bit more love, a little bit more attention. The nice thing about the crackle is that you can't really tell if you have a tear or a mistake. I'm just going to use my fondant smoother to just kind of clean up that bottom edge. And then you can just use an X-Acto blade to cut off the extra. You can use this extra fondant to make like cupcake toppers or little bows or something like that, but basically that's it. That's how you do the gold fondant crackle technique. All right, so to do our gold crackle, I'm gonna roll out some fondant. And I already have a piece here left over from another project that I just did. So I set that to the side. I'm going to use that for the top. So when you're doing the crackle, you want to have a piece that's for the top side of your cake, whatever diameter that is. In my case, it's 6 inches. It just needs to be 6 inches across. And then you need a piece that's going to be, in the end, 3 times as big as 6 inches. So that's like 6, 12, 18. So this is plenty long because we are going to roll it out a little bit more, but for right now that's good enough. And then I'm going to want to torch the surface. All right, so the fondant is cool. It's unstuck from the table. And I'm just going to use my rolling pin to just give it some crackle. All right, so first we're going to cover the top. I just have my other piece of fondant here. Just make sure it's crackled enough. Just going to place that on top. And then just with your very sharp, brand new X-Acto blade, you're just going to cut around the top. Then I'm just going to trim one side of my long piece of fondant just straight across. It's got a nice flat edge. And I'm just going to roll it up. And I'm just going to put the flat edge down against the cake and working my way around. Don't worry about that overlap. Just use your fondant smoother to smooth it out. And then first, right where this overlaps, I'm going to come through both layers of fondant and cut. You can save this extra fondant for another project, or you can make a little bow or something. And then I'm going to pull away. Didn't quite go all the way through. I'm going to pull away the inside piece of fondant and just match up my edges. So you might see a very, very slight seam, but nothing super noticeable. Then we're going to come in from the top and just making our blade flush with the top of the cake. Just going to trim off the outside piece of fondant. And if your fondant seems to be pulling or not cooperating, you can stick this whole thing in the fridge for like 5 minutes, and that will just stiffen up the fondant and make it a little bit easier to cut. But I'm in a hurry, so I'm not going to worry about that. So you see how it's kind of rough a little bit, but we're just going to kind of pat that down and smooth it, and nobody will know. So this process is called paneling. So you'll end up having like a little bit of a white edge on the upper part, but the side of the crackle stays a lot more intact. And you can always come in with a little bit of gold and just kind of touch up that edge so it doesn't look quite so obvious. I think that looks pretty darn great. And that's it. That's everything you need to know about making a gold crackled fondant cake. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this tutorial. I'm Liz Merrick, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.